Hello, and welcome to another episode of Inside the Huddle. Today is Sunday, May 11th. It is episode 62 of the Inside the Huddle podcast. Thank you, as always, for joining us. Make sure to please like and subscribe. Another week in the NFL offseason down, another week closer to OTAs, mini camp, and shortly here, training camp as well. Weather is warmer. We got rookie mini camps this weekend, had some rookie mini camps last weekend. Football's in the air. You could start to smell it a little bit. You got big trade in George Pickens to Dallas. We got some big news out of New Orleans. Derek Carr hanging it up. He calls his retirement. So a lot happening. It's May, but the NFL is always 365 days a year, always something going on. So, DiMari, we got a lot to unpack. We got a lot to unpack in Dallas. How's it going, man?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. Definitely a big week, especially in Dallas. Kind of, that's what we're going to start off at, anyways, in Dallas. But yeah, like you said, football is getting closer. It's almost like sometimes like they cut the grass outside. You can smell that football
Yeah.
grass type of aroma when you walk outside. That's how you know we're close. But yeah, even with the schedule, a few games being leaked here and there, the release coming out in a few days here, we are definitely right around the corner, and I am excited for it. Can't wait. And thanks to Jerry Jones finally doing something, I'm even more excited. And again, that's where we're going to start off. So let's go to Dallas, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And like you mentioned with the schedule, we'll have a ton of content on that next week as well. You've already seen some leaks with some games. I think tomorrow there's supposed to be even some more leaks. And then I feel like the schedule always gets leaked always before like that 8 o'clock Eastern actual full revealing of it. But that'll be great. I believe that's Wednesday, the 14th. So that'll be exciting. Cannot wait for that. I'll start to really break things down. But yeah, we got to start out of Dallas. One of the bigger moves so far of the offseason takes place here in May. Trade details: George Pickens goes to Dallas. They send 2026 third-round pick and a 2027 fifth-round pick to Pittsburgh. And in return, of course, Dallas will get Pickens, and they also get a 2026 round pick. So Pickens, the center of this deal, and thrown in a couple other picks. The floor is yours. What are your thoughts on this move? Jerry Jones, Dallas has been linked to almost every single player out there the last couple of years, the last like two off seasons. They haven't gotten it done. They finally get it done. They get help next to CeeDee Lamb and another weapon for Dak Prescott.
I mean, part of me, I'm happy that they actually did decide to make a move. We both know how the receiver room looked, where we kept saying it was CD and nobody. So that's great. They finally actually did something. Love it. We spent a lot of times on George Pickens, and my stance remains the same. Where I don't think he's that great. I think he has the potential to be great, but this is not a guy I think comes over and instantly a Super Bowl contender with this team, and he's had his issues. He had his issues with drops. He had his issues disappearing in big games. I mean, the playoff loss, he had one catch for 6 yards, if I'm correct, on like three targets. So he's disappeared. I know he's only going into year four, so it's still a fairly young career, but
Yeah.
1,000 yard season in 3 years of football as the wide receiver one. That's just not the production that you were drafted, to bring to Pittsburgh. So obviously now with CeeDee Lamb, that should open him up more. You're playing with Dak Prescott, who is going to kind of share the wealth, but I'm not huge on it. Like I like the move. So for those watching that you might not understand where I'm coming from. Absolutely, like I do love the move. They need a receiver desperately. Got a receiver. Pickens has great upside, great potential, whatever you want to say. But the part of me again where I'm just like, it's kind of whatever, is the consistency, the drops, the ego, all those things. Kind of Pittsburgh, whether they come out and say it or not, is why they kind of decided to trade him. There's a lot of things, a lot of baggage that comes with George Pickens. And again, I don't think instantly this team goes from a, Super Bowl. When I say Super Bowl count, let's say compete with Detroit and compete with Philly and, can knock on that doorstep to kind of take over that reign of them this year. I think they're good enough to make the playoffs with George Pickens there if everyone is healthy, but definitely not like a Super Bowl caliber move that they made. So, for Dallas, I guess we'll just see how it plays out, considering it also may be a rental. He will be an unrestricted free agent next season. So it's a lot that goes into this, but I guess for, this first year, I'll enjoy it while I can, and we'll just see where it goes from there.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a good way to look at it. I think you do have to give Cowboys, like you said, some credit here. They finally were able to make a move. Whether we've talked about the whole Derrick Henry stuff last year, there's been a list of guys that they could have gone after free agency trade that they haven't. They obviously feel like this is the right guy. And I think that last part you mentioned is really, I think, the big deal to this all is he's got one more year left on his contract. In my opinion, it feels like this is sort of a trial, right? I think you bring Pickens in, see what he looks like next to CeeDee Lamb, see what he looks like with Dak Prescott. I think the ego and the kind of diva that he's been labeled as, you hope that can sort of be taken away a little bit from actually having a legitimate quarterback, having a leader there. Because you look at his time in Pittsburgh, he kind of was the offense. Like, he didn't have a quarterback, right? They were, you had an offensive coordinator change there. There was a lot of moving parts. You look at Dallas, you have a legitimate quarterback. You have a guy who can put up MVP numbers year in and year out. And you have a legitimate wide receiver one. And I think Pickens, hopefully, mindset wise, like, realizes he's got to kind of take a back seat a little bit. Like, he's the wide receiver two now. And I think that's what Pickens is. He's a very good wide receiver too. I think we both agree he's a wide receiver one, maybe on like a average team, right? But I don't think he can be a wide receiver one or a legitimate wide receiver one on like a deep playoff team. The Steelers are a borderline playoff team, but I think you can, if Pickens is your wide receiver two, that's a good spot to be in. And you hope that some of the production, the drops, of course, go away. And you do hope just he does benefit a little bit more from having an actual quarterback. And like I said, I think hopefully the attitude and the personality changes with that, if that makes sense. But yeah, he comes with a lot of baggage. He is probably going to be one of the more high baggage wide receiver twos in the NFL, in terms of what he brings from off the field type of stuff and some of his antics, even on the field just as well, in terms of, emotion and the diva stuff that we've talked about a lot. But look, he's a talented player. And the Cowboys desperately needed help. And this isn't like it's some washed up veteran Keenan Allen or Amari Cooper, not necessarily washed up. I think we both believe he's got some more gas left in the tank, but it's not like you're going after an older veteran who doesn't have much time left. You're going after a guy kind of banking on upside. He's had a productive 3 years. It hasn't been perfect. It's definitely been inconsistent. There's been flashes, but to bring in as a wide receiver two at a desperate position of need, I think it's a solid move for Dallas. It's a much needed move. And from the Pittsburgh angle, they desperately need help the wide receiver outside of DK Metcalf. And I think we kind of saw this move coming for a while when it comes to the George Pickens trade. I think the biggest surprise to me was it happened with Dallas, right? I think that was the biggest thing. They've been linked to almost everybody and haven't been able to really get anything done. So they finally get something done. But I think with the Steelers' point of view now, you have a lot of questions outside of DK in that wide receiver room, and potentially they go out and trade or sign somebody. This has been something that feels like they've been wanting to move on from Pickens now for a little bit. So maybe they have a plan, but outside of DK, you've got Robert Woods, Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, Scotty Miller, Ben Skoranek. I mean, not really. Robert Woods is a veteran, but can't be relied on as your wide receiver too. Roman Wilson is completely unknown. A guy who didn't do anything last year out of Michigan in the third round. Calvin Austin is got some potential, but you're asking him to take on a massive role. This guy been a 500-yard receiver. You're asking him to step up in a much bigger role. So what are your thoughts now on where Pittsburgh stands with this without Pickens, who feels like they started drive out the door a little bit the minute they brought in DK Metcalf?
First I feel bad for DK Metcalf. You come over there,
yeah,
and assuming you're going to be playing with George Pickens next to you, and we've seen what DK has always had in Seattle. So now you kind of go from DK and some others that can kind of step up, and now you just name the guy for Pittsburgh, and you're kind of just like, what are we doing? And I honestly think that just set them back. I mean, we've already talked about them enough this offseason and what it may take to stay competitive in the division. And because, Mike Tomlin alone can't do everything himself. His coaching can only take that team so far. So we already kind of know the deal with Pittsburgh and some of the weapons that they've lost this season. And now I think it puts them in a very bad spot. And you are unsure at the quarterback position right now, which you don't know if your 6th-round draft pick is going to be your starter or it's going to be Aaron Rodgers. You don't know what you're going to do in that case. Your running back room is unproven. You got Jalen Warren, you got Caleb Johnson, who's very good in college, but unproven running back room. And now your receiver room is, like you said, it's DK and respectfully a bunch of wide receiver threes. So maybe they are hoping on like a Roman Wilson to step up. And you kind of named Robert Woods, who is a very good and savvy vet, but kind of not even very old, like an older guy, possession kind of guy, not going to stretch the field. So Pittsburgh is in a very bad spot. And I mean, offensively, just from a weapon standpoint, outside of DK, this is probably one of the worst rosters that I can think of that they've had in quite some time, just for like as far as talent. So I mean, if their plan was to maybe tank and go after Arch Manning next year, this is a great start. Because I don't think this team is going to be very good, and it's hard to say that with Mike Tomlin led teams, but I don't think this is going to be a very good football team this year.
Yeah, I'm very questioning so much about where the Steelers are at now because you look at like the way things are structured. The Aaron Rodgers move still could happen. I feel like we're just waiting as the day goes on. I mean, who knows what's going to happen with that move? It's May and he's still not signed. So at this point, anything could happen. But like, let's just say they don't bring in Rodgers, and let's say they do roll out Will Howard. Let's say he wins the job. Like, to me, maybe that is kind of tanking, but to me, it's like, I don't know. I feel like they've got to get some help for him as well if you're going to roll with a rookie quarterback. Because outside of, like you said, there's nothing on this offense. You're not putting your quarterbacks. I mean, Mason Rudolph and Skylar Thompson aren't great options. You could put Jerry Rice and whoever the heck you want out there. They're probably maybe only winning 9 games. But let's say Will Howard does start, and this is what I was thinking. Like, you're not putting him in a good spot. I mean, there's nobody outside of DK Metcalf, and DK Metcalf as well. You mentioned it. He kind of came here, and now he's in no man's land. Defenses can just focus in on him, and that's it. So it's an ugly roster, and we've talked about this offense, even with Pickens and DK, even with better quarterback play, or even if they went out and got Rodgers, let's say. We've talked about this offense for Pittsburgh just being so old and outdated, and here we are in May, and it still feels old and outdated, and just so many unknowns. I mean, maybe Calvin Austin can take a step, maybe Jalen Warren could have a big year and take over, be better than Najee Harris and take a step there and be a little bit more explosive, provide a little bit more, speed and stuff like that, maybe, but that's a lot of unknowns you're relying on in a division where you've got Lamar Jackson and a Ravens team that'll be easily back in the playoffs, and you've got a Bengals team with a defense that, if it can improve, will be another big threat again. Yeah, the path is, and an AFC West as well that's going to be looking to steal some playoff bids. So things look a lot harder now for Steelers, no doubt. It's rough. I just feel like there has to be a plan, like a backup plan. There's no way they go into week 1 with this receiving core. It feels like, do they trade for a Romeo Doubs? Do they another younger receiver? Do they trade for, I mean, now all of a sudden we got all the Brandon Ayuk rumors swirling of Ayuk going to Pittsburgh. Like, do they have something else up their sleeve, or wait and maybe sign Amari Cooper if things really look bad in camp and Amari Cooper's still available? It's interesting where they're at. Tough spot.
I mean, thing is too, you kind of are, kind of off topic, but on topic at the same time. I feel like you also don't get that quarterback situation figured out until you do get another receiver. Because if you're Aaron Rodgers and I step in the building, and respectfully, all these guys are in the NFL at the end of the day, but if I'm Aaron Rodgers and I'm looking at his wide receiver room, I see DK and I'm just like, who is that guy in the back right corner? I'm not coming to play for Pittsburgh, especially at this stage in my career where things have not looked great at all the last two seasons. We've talked about Rodgers and his ego and his pride, how he would want to go out. So he won't put himself in a situation to look worse than what he has the last two seasons. So I mean, if they're banking on Rodgers, if that is part of his master plan, yeah, you have to go get a receiver. You mentioned Ayuk. We've seen that kind of heat up during this previous offseason between Pittsburgh, Ayuk, maybe New England and Ayuk. Like there were some teams. So it's very, again, like you said, like you were so confused and so am I on the direction of this team because you say it almost every single time and it still fits perfectly. They are just at a midpoint where they're not good enough to, just be extravagant and potentially win a Super Bowl, but they're not bad enough where they're going to have a high draft position. Yeah, it's a bad spot for them.
Yeah, they're stuck in quicksand. They're stuck in the mediocrity section, which is not where you want to be. They're just as far away from a Super Bowl as they are the number one overall pick. They're stuck in the middle, and you kind of got to choose a side, and maybe they are starting to choose that side. You move on from Pickens. You're not extending him. This is a trend, though, with Pittsburgh. And I guess from a Steelers standpoint, if there was an organization to move on from a young receiver and be able to kind of replenish, it would be Pittsburgh because they've done this a lot and they've been able to stay competitive and been able to get some productive players at the position. And you look at since 2010, I wanted to read this stat: 16 extension eligible wide receivers drafted by the team since 2010. Only 3 have received second contracts. 5 have played out their 4-year deals and then departed in free agency. 2 were traded during their rookie deals, one of those being Pickens. And then 4 were cut before finishing those deals, and 1 was signed off the Steelers practice squad. So this is a team that's is pretty known for drafting receivers, and they're out the door in 3 to 4 years, whether it's trade, whether it's letting them leave in free agency, whether it's releasing them. So this is kind of another example of that, where Steelers receiver out the door, Pickens, 24 years old, entering year number 4, last year that contract, and he's out. So it's very odd spot for the Steelers. I will say this: if Rodgers goes to Pittsburgh, I would put a good chunk of money that their wide receiver trade would be go get Allen Lazard, which is not going to solve any problems. But Rodgers is going to want a buddy or two with him because Randall Cobb's not in the league anymore. So he's got to pick somebody else.
And that's usually how it goes. And that is a guy that I've seen is potentially on the market right now who could possibly be traded. So wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. What a room that would be. Go get Lazard and steal Randall Cobb out of retirement and call it a day.
DK might retire.
That'd be something. Yeah, he might. I mean, maybe, I don't know. Maybe this, who knows? Who knows what the reasoning was? I mean, we kind of know the reasoning, but I really like this move for Dallas. I'll just say that. I do. I think there is some concerns about Pickens, but I think as a wide receiver too in that offense with an actual quarterback, I think they should be able to keep him in check from a diva standpoint, and hopefully he kind of understands his role a little bit. And like the Cowboys got better, the Steelers they didn't. And ultimately, of course, you'll kind of see what happens with the 3rd round pick next year, how all the draft picks end up playing out. But one of the bigger trades so far. And maybe Pittsburgh has something else up their sleeve. Now, since we were on the topic of Steelers and trading for wide receivers, wanted to get into some other wide receivers that could potentially be dealt here the rest of the way here in the offseason. I think we just named a few: Allen Lazard, Brandon Ayuk, Romeo Doubs, some names that could be thrown out there. I guess, what are your thoughts on those? Maybe even Doubs as well, since we touched a little bit more on Ayuk and Lazard just there. But I think a guy like Romeo Doubs, you've seen some reporting that they could move on, right? They drafted Matthew Goldman. They have Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks. They have a lot of young talent. It feels like Doubs could sort of be that odd man out. You see that being something where not necessarily just Pittsburgh related, just NFL related. he could be dealt to a team with a need at that position.
Yeah, I mean, if I hate to say it, but if there was one that's going off that Green Bay roster, probably definitely going to be Dobbs. Um, Pittsburgh. I mentioned Pittsburgh again. I do, just hypothetically, if Dobbs was to
Yep.
get kind of dealt, I think that would be a good move for Pittsburgh. I mean, Dobbs is kind of he's a hard guy to really get a read on. Like he's not really your typical like downfield type of guy, and he's not too much. He's not just your like underneath type of guy. And honestly, that receiver room is so loaded. I feel like I don't remember much of watching Romeo Dobbs even play. So kind of hard for me to say much on him as a player, considering again, like I said, so much going on, and they're kind of wide receiver by committee type of room. So I haven't seen anything from that absolutely stands out. But I mean, if he were to be traded, it's not even about I guess type of player he is. I guess it could be just who needs what. So yes, a Pittsburgh would be one. You could throw in like a New England be another one. Just a few teams that are in desperate need of some wide receiver help. And I think if you got the opportunity to go after him, then you go after him. Another one we mentioned, we said Lazard. But one that I seen kind of swirling with, which was the link to Dallas, was Rashad Bateman, which I think would be pretty decent move for some teams. Highly doubt in division, sticking with Pittsburgh here. Highly doubt Baltimore deals him to a divisional rival, but seems as if Dallas was in the works to get a deal done for Bateman and then decided that I guess that fell through, went after Pickens instead. So, I mean, Bateman, I think, from the name of guys that we potentially just listed out there, probably should be your number one guy, probably number two if you want to go with IU, but probably your number two guy to go after if a receiver were to be traded. Hasn't done what Baltimore traded him to do, but still very productive, if that makes sense. Has some injury
Yeah.
history. So yeah, I mean, it's very interesting to see where some guys might move. And again, you mentioned Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, some guys who are free agents. So very interesting how this might line up, depending on who lands where, who gets traded where, who gets signed. But yeah, I can absolutely see like Dobbs and maybe a Bateman getting traded.
Yeah, and you make a good point on Bateman. Obviously, hasn't lived up to the expectations, right? Taken in the first round, but some of it's been the injuries, also just the offense he's in, not crazy favorable for wide receivers in Baltimore. I think you get to more of a pass-heavy approach. Obviously, they run a lot, use the tight ends a lot. Bateman could be a name to look for as a guy to potentially take off. Had a career year last year, so definitely like that. Yeah, I agree. Those are the main ones in terms of guys available. I think it just all depends on like what teams want, what they value, or you want more of your. And actually, kind of all of them are more on your younger side. Hopefully, breakout type of players, whether it's Bateman, Dobbs, or do you want a guy in Ayuk that's more so in his prime, already got the big contract, is coming off of an injury. What type of player stage of his career do you want? Or do you want the savvy, reliable veteran and a Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, more of a 1-year thing that you take the approach in free agency? I'll throw another name out there, and I know that the Texans just traded for him, but the way they approach the draft, I could see a world where maybe not, but maybe more so maybe during the season, somebody like a Christian Kirk, where you look at the way Houston approached things. They have Nico Collins, getting Tank Dell. They also drafted Higgins and Noel. So they could put themselves in a spot. And Kirk's a veteran coming off of a pretty poor year last year where he only played, 8 games. I know only played, I think it was 8, 9 games, but even in those games wasn't great. Could be a name to maybe look for more during the season if he kind of gets pushed back in that wide receiver room by a Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins, 2 rookies, if they have big years. So that could be somebody else to throw in.
Maybe even Tank Dell. I mean, I doubt it, but coming off injury, but like you said, for all the reasons, very receiver heavy kind of roster,
Yeah.
depth chart, possibility.
Yeah, it feels like they have a lot of guys there, and the way they approach the draft, taking both receivers out of Iowa State, it feels like somebody might be forced out the door.
Yeah.
Um, and they gave up a 7th-round pick for Kirk. It's not like they gave up anything
Yeah.
crazy. You're going to get that back in a trade for him, essentially. So, do they view move on from him to give playing time to other guys could be something. Maybe this is reaching, but could maybe look at they drafted Jalen Royals. Juju still plays a role, like one of Juju or Hollywood Brown, maybe, if Jalen Royals is able to take a step, right? They already have Rashee Rice. They have Xavier Worthy. Those two guys take steps, like potentially that could be somebody or two guys that could be on the block. Maybe not so much now, but again, during the season, if they're not playing much of a role, wide receiver needy team comes out, needs a receiver, take one of those guys potentially as names to look for.
Yeah, I didn't really think of that. Kind of forgot about Rashee Rice even being part of that roster, but
Yeah.
Rashee Rice being there and Juju, just kind of looking through. I mean, I would probably say Hollywood Brown would be the one to go. I mean, Juju, I
Yeah.
feel like is so past his prime, and I kind of forgot he was even in Kansas City. So I think teams would probably be more intrigued by Hollywood Brown, but they got a lot of guys with Worthy, with Rice, Royal somewhat. If he kind of turns they want him to be that such similar play styles, where would Hollywood Brown fit amongst that? So I could see that.
Yeah. That's the big thing. Royals, from like a true X receiver standpoint, could take over. Again, maybe something more so that happens during the year as opposed to. But again, this is kind of just throwing stuff out there. I mean, I'm a big believer in don't trade guys just to trade guys. Like, you do want to keep good depth, right? Because you could be one injury away or one bad stretch away from a rookie in Royals from needing a veteran to step up. So, it's you don't want to just never been a big fan of that where teams have so many players so they just start trading them at one position. It's got to make sense, of course, for both sides. But yeah, those are the main ones. I would say not really any, right? Not really anybody else that I can think of.
Only other one I kind of, and this was like a Dallas related thing, so I highly doubt it. But I saw DJ Moore when Dallas was talking about acquiring a wide receiver. Just wouldn't make too much sense to me. I mean, Chicago again not bad enough to the point where they got to get rid of guys. Obviously, Keenan Allen still not being there also plays a factor. And then Luther Burden, I think you want to pair him with DJ Moore instead of releasing DJ Moore. And the guy's just coming off a contract extension, I believe, 2 years ago. But that was not one I think will happen whatsoever. But it was very interesting because usually when names start to swirl and those type of things, like you kind of, hey, there's something going on that we don't know about.
Yeah.
And DJ Moore is not a outspoken guy. Really just shows up, plays ball, drops 1,200 yards, and calls it a season. But who knows? Maybe Chicago is looking too bad to the point where they're just like, hey, maybe not. They move on from DJ Moore. But again, I really don't see that happening.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. I don't see that. I think that would be a pretty large trade. And from a Chicago perspective, their whole mindset this entire offseason has been built around Caleb Williams. They started that by bringing in Ben Johnson. They drafted Luther Burden. You already have Rome Odunze. You already have DJ Moore. I feel like that kind of falls onto the line of just trading a guy, sort of just to trade a guy, now DJ Moore 4 years from now when he's 33-ish, like 4 or 5 years, if we're having this conversation, or if we were 5 years down the road having this conversation, yeah, probably, because DJ Moore at that point, probably not a guy that you're going to rely on to be your number one wide receiver. But now, yeah, still, big role. I guess I will throw this out there. because we did talk about New England a little bit, maybe acquiring another receiver. Of course, they brought in Diggs. They also drafted Kyle Williams. Jalen Polk, and I'll even throw Javon Baker. Not saying they're going to trade those guys, but no guarantee either of those make the roster, especially Polk.
Yeah.
I think Polk more so than Baker. Baker was a 4th-round pick, so it's not crazy to see a day 3 guy potentially get cut. But Polk would be not a surprise, but I think that would just be the icing on the cake in terms of a horrible swing and miss in the 2nd round for a guy coming out of college that had, in some eyes, was a borderline 1st-round talent. I mean, they took him 37th overall. That's no joke. That's in the top 40. Getting selected in the top 40 is a big deal, right? Those early 2nd-round picks in many ways can be an extension of the 1st round. Polk was one of those guys, right? Had a ton of success there with Adunze in Washington, McMillan as well. Like he was awful. So he could be a name that no guarantee they make that roster. And he's already pretty far down the depth chart. I mean,
Yeah.
It's pretty rough. Is some of the names that they also Mac Hollins. I mean, I don't think anybody can confidently say Jalen Polk's gonna be better than Mac Hollins.
No.
And that's even if Hollins is probably going to be a nobody without Josh Allen. So I
do have one. Well, after what were you about to say? It might be what I was about to say.
I would just say, I think going back to Dobbs, I think 2 AFC East teams are great fits for him. I'd love to see the Jets take a shot at him because they could use some help outside of Garrett Wilson. So many questions right now. And New England as well. I don't want to see him going to New England. But Dobbs in New England, I think, would be a really good finish to their offseason because the way they approached our receiving core, I personally really like it. They would go, you get your guy in Stephon Diggs, who's that better and bigger name. Kyle Williams, you draft him, rookie, speed guy, downfield threat, can stretch the field. And then Mac Hollins is sort of your, depth 4th option, let's say. And then if you go and get a guy in Dobbs and you trade for him, that's your young kind of potential receiver where you bring him in and him and Drake May, Diggs, him and Kyle Williams, like you can kind of really start to look at that and say, we got a good mix. We got some veteran talent. Holland's a veteran. Diggs, of course, the bigger veteran. And you got 2 younger guys, a guy in Dobbs that's got some more untapped potential. So if New England did that, I don't want to see him do that. And I hate the Patriots, but unbiased hate aside, I think you'd have to really praise him for the way they approached the receiver room this offseason, if that's a move that they did make. Because I still think there could still be one move to make there. Outside of Diggs and Kyle Williams, I'd prefer Dobbs to be my next option, even over DeMario Douglas, than Mac Hollins or any of those guys.
That's interesting. I had another name kind of that, again, no reports, no circulation, but that I also thought would be pretty good fits for, both the Jets and New England, and that is Chris Godwin. And where does this come from? I know it's probably so out of the ordinary, but you kind of look, you got Mike Evans there, you drafted Egbuka. Just say McMillan comes along, Godwin's coming off that injury, Godwin is getting a little older. So, I mean, does a team like the Jets or New England, who probably want to go youthful, but hey, never hurts to get a wide receiver with the experience that he has and the productivity and the consistency like Chris Godwin, is that one that we may see Tampa move on from? And, like I said, the Jets and the Patriots, 2 teams that clearly still need some receiver help. You can throw Pittsburgh out there too. Are they willing to kind of take that risk on a guy who might not be back until December, playing football? But I feel like that's one that, again, is so out of the ordinary, but just think about what Tampa kind of has, and they just drafted a guy. Godwin's back healthy. Somebody needs some help. I mean, it's not too crazy to say that.
Out of Pittsburgh, Patriots, and the Steelers, or the Jets, what would you rank those wide receiver rooms? Just talking about it now, of course, with
That's tough. I might go the Jets at 1, just with Lazard still being on the roster at the moment. Probably New England at 2 and Pittsburgh 3. I don't know. That's a tough one. That's a tough one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Pittsburgh would definitely be last.
Just because everyone's still unproven. It's like there's
Yeah, I mean, outside
nobody
of
there
DK, there's
outside DK.
nobody.
At least New England, they got some guys that has played and
Yeah.
kind of
Well,
impactful in their own way. But
and you also have an
I'm
exciting rookie in Kyle Williams. Like, there's not an
yeah.
exciting, really young player on Pittsburgh, you know?
I mean, the only one that you could say is Roman Wilson, who they drafted to kind of be the guy, or not the guy, but be very productive for them, and he hasn't done anything. I don't think he's played.
Yeah.
So Pittsburgh is probably definitely dead last in that category.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll be interesting. And then to your Godwin point, the injury, of course, came into a factor. I just think, like, if anybody was truly interested, probably Pittsburgh or New England would have probably just taken him in free agency this year
Yeah.
as opposed to waiting. But maybe that's something where next year potentially, because I think what's the 3-year deal with Tampa. So I think you look at that and say that he signed this year. I don't know the exact logistics of the contract, but is that something where if Godwin has another kind of year where he misses some time and Ibuka plays really well, is that something maybe more next off season that could happen, even though he just signed the new contract, right? Because then you start to think, okay, maybe he's kind of on his way out. He'll be 30 at that point next year. So, been in the league for a little bit. I mean, 2017 now? It's crazy how fast some of these guys' careers go.
Time flies. I feel like I was just watching him
Wild.
at Penn State, and now he's
Yeah.
going, and it's crazy.
Yeah. It's wild. I mean, he was the young guy next to Mike Evans, and now he's the veteran. Still
Yeah.
south of 30. You got one more year left south
Yeah,
of 30.
yeah.
But once you hit over north of 30, you start to have questions with receivers because a lot of these guys can hit a wall pretty quick. Not always 30. It doesn't take sometimes 35, 36. It could be 31, 32. You start to see some of these guys hit a wall, especially if they get into the league pretty early. If they're in the league, I mean, how many years has Godwin been in the league? What is this? Is this his 9th season? Right? He's played 8 years, or is this I think this is his 9th. So what, he came in at about like 20, 21. So I mean, 32, 33, he's going to be 10, 11 years in already. I mean, it's a long time. That'll be Tennessee Titans territory.
Yeah, washed.
Or that'll be like Cam Ward. They pick up Cam Ward's 5th-year option, and we've got the script. Cam Ward's 5th-year option picked up. He hasn't played great, but they pick it up anyway. He's kind of been solid, and like to try and get him over the top, they go and sign Godwin and hope that he can turn into, at that point, we'll be talking about 2021 through 2023 Godwin like it was ages ago.
And it's quite fitting because I know we said Tennessee is a retirement home for receivers. And I mean, I can't remember who they just signed a washed wide receiver a few weeks ago. So if the script lines up how it usually does, Chris Godwin will be a Tennessee Titan before it's all said.
Yeah, definitely. Tyler Lockett, welcome to the Titans.
Yep, there we go. That's who it was. Yeah.
His career's just shot. Like, it's done. And I actually think Tyler Lockett still had a little bit left. But now that it's with the Titans, forget about it. Yeah. He'll have like 380 yards this year in 17 games. He'll be a non-factor and they'll win 4 games.
Yep. It's over for him.
Yeah. Anyway. Always interesting. You never know what's with these receivers. You really don't. We've talked about this before, but having your career relying on another position can create a lot of strange things. So we'll see what happens. But that's that. Now we got to move on to another big story here as we close things out. Derek Carr hanging it up. He called his retirement. Of course, we heard the news on the injury that he would need surgery on the shoulder, which was going to force him to miss the season if he got the injury. Kind of seeked, I believe, some second opinions. He decides to move on from the game. So Derek Carr retires. I guess first, just the Derek Carr point of view. And because I do want to start with that, then we can get to what's next for New Orleans, because now they're put in a pretty tough spot. And they kind of known this. And I have some I have questions about how New Orleans has just handled this situation, because for a while that they've known that at least Derek Carr probably won't play the 2025 season. And they still went out there and drafted Tyler Shook. So again, I'm not trying to crush the guy. Who knows? Maybe he's great, but I think there was better options out there. If you're talking about a guy coming in and starting day one now, maybe they Spencer Rattler, whoever. And I mean, just, I don't know. Wish the best to them thrown to that receiving core, because we haven't even talked about that. Pittsburgh's bad. Jets and Patriots have some questions. The Saints are on another level of cooked when it comes to wide receivers outside of Chris Olave. So Derek Carr retires. So we'll start with the Carr angle, even though I kind of went into the Saints angle there. I guess Carr's career is over. How do you sum it up? I mean, obviously you wish him nothing but the best. It stinks that this is the way it ended, right? An injury. You never want to see guys' careers end like this. You know, preferably you'd rather a guy just leave the game when he feels is ready, not necessarily force call because of an injury. You know, I think when you kind of sum up Carr's career, he was a good quarterback, right? I don't think he was ever put into the best situations. For a while there in Oakland, I think he got put into some pretty bad spots. I actually have some of it in front of me. He played for 6 head coaches, 2 interns, and 5 play callers during his 9 years with the Raiders, plus a new coordinator in each of his 2 seasons with the Saints. So he went through a lot. There was a lot of moving parts around him. If he was in a little bit more of a stable organization, I think we probably look at Carr's career a lot differently. But anyway, enough of me rambling. What are your thoughts now that it's all over for Carr?
Oh, that's a different angle that I was about to go to. I was gonna say we have fell in love with mediocre quarterbacks. Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, yes, Oakland wasn't great. The 4-time Pro Bowler, giving him that. In 11 seasons, the guy had 11 seasons in the NFL. The guy had 3 winning seasons.
Yeah.
3 winning seasons to be drafted as, the franchise guy. I'm sorry, I can't name of another quarterback that after that 4th year for Carr, or maybe 50, I think 4th year might have been 16 if I'm correct, which they went 12-3. He broke his leg. That was a whole something. Even after that 5th year, any other quarterback, even with how 16 went for the Raiders, probably would have been shipped out of there and on another team. We fell in love with mediocre. Derek Carr was not that great of a quarterback, just in my opinion. Again, three winning seasons in 11 years, 1 playoff appearance in which he lost, which is in the back end of his career in 2021. Again, granted, 2016 he broke his leg. I think week like 14 or 15, like right before the season ended. Yeah, I think that Raiders team would have went pretty far, but the guy didn't do anything. I mean, the guy didn't do anything much besides his numbers weren't that great. If you go look at his numbers, they were pretty mediocre. I think his best year came in 14, where he had 32 and 13, I believe. So the year could be wrong, but it's not like he was putting up outstanding numbers and 42 plus touchdowns and the interceptions were down. He was just a guy. He was just a guy. Don't get me wrong. Like, I actually like Derek Carr, but he was just a guy. I think we have fell in love with mediocre quarterback play. If I hear Derek Carr in Hall of Fame, I'm going to lose my mind. I'm going to stop watching football.
He's definitely not a Hall of Famer. Yeah, he was okay. He was solid. Yeah, I think he was mediocre, slightly above. I think for a 2nd round pick, right, wasn't a top 10 pick, I just think for me, looking at where he was drafted, I mean, again, he was 36th overall, so it was pretty, I mean, in terms of like, we just got done talking about it with Jalen Polk. You drafted in the top 40, you have high expectations because that early of that second round is in some ways an extension of the first round. But, for a second round pick and everything else that kind of like, I guess, went on around him, he was okay. I mean, yeah, he had an okay career. I guess just some moments like the injury sucked. Who knows how far they go? They certainly would have went a lot further than Matt McGloin starting in that playoff game against Derek Watt and the Texans. They are Derek Watt. Look at me, combining brothers and Derek Carr, J.J. Watt. Made the Pro Bowl a couple times, I believe, 3-time Pro Bowler. 4 times. Had that stretch 2015, 2016, 2017 where he was a Pro Bowler. The end in Vegas, I just think like that 1 year in the playoffs, that started that year with John Gruden getting fired because of the emails. They ended up having Rick Bisaccia, the special teams coordinator, take over, and they made the playoffs. If they were smart as an organization, they should have just kept Bisaccia. Instead, they went out and hired Josh McDaniels, which was a disaster. So was Carr great? No. Was he elite? No. Is he a Hall of Famer? Heck no. If you think Derek Carr is a Hall of Famer, then you're out of your mind. I am definitely not in that boat. But I think for all the moving pieces around him, and look, I'm not going to sit here and act like the Raiders didn't give Carr weapons either. Like they did. I mean, he had Amari Cooper, had Crabtree, right? He had Devontae Adams there towards the end in Vegas. New Orleans didn't give him much, but
Marshawn Lynch was there. He had a lot of talent.
Definitely.
With the Raiders.
He also had Jason Witten when he was 80 years old, but he did all seriousness, he did have talent. Now, New Orleans the last 2 years, not really. I mean, he did have Olave, but the New Orleans time for Derek Carr, I don't really think should tarnish his legacy much. Like,
not at all.
I don't think if you look at Derek Carr mediocre before New Orleans, you should look at him as mediocre after New Orleans.
Yeah.
If you look at him as however you viewed Derek Carr before New Orleans, I think you view him after it. Playing 27 games in New Orleans should not, where Dennis Allen got fired and they were a disaster with no wide receivers. I don't think that should change a whole lot on your point of him. I think he was for a second round pick, and you look at some of the other quarterbacks actually taken in that class. I mean, Carr kind of came out of there on the positive end. The other quarterbacks in front of him, Blake Bortles, Johnny Manziel, and Teddy Bridgewater, I believe, were the 3 in front of him. Those were all 3 first-round picks. Oakland then took Carr 36th, of course, with the 4th pick in the second round. And I'm just kind of looking through the rest of this draft here. Garoppolo was then selected. So you could make the case here as a second-round pick that he did come out of that draft as probably the best quarterback. Tom Savage, Aaron Murray, AJ McCarron, just some real clunkers here in the back end. David Fales, Jets legend, and just some random names that I've never even heard of. I'd never even heard of this guy. Keith Wenning from Baltimore, Taj Boyd, Garrett Gilbert. So I'm going to 7th round quarterbacks, but he was probably the best in his draft class. Second round pick, I think he was okay. He was all right. Now I will say this: he was average. Yeah, he was mediocre. Out of 10, what would you rate him?
Out of 10, I'll probably give him a 6.5. Again, it was nothing. It was nothing special. Like, it wasn't much. And kind of going off the Hall of Fame, just to add, if Derek Carr's number at any point in the next few seasons is in the Raiders Hall of Fame, I will sign a petition using 1,000 different names to make sure that does not happen. He is not, and it's not like I'm just a humongous Derek Carr hater, but I actually like Derek Carr. But again, to get your number retired in the organization, just absolutely not. Absolutely not. It should not happen. Derek Carr was good for what he was, a second round pick, but he was not a guy where you kind of, again, you talking about the moving pieces, but at no point, I think until maybe after 16, did you look at the Raiders and you looked at Derek Carr like he can get them over the top. They can win that division. That is a very good team. We know how they are going to be very good as long as he's there. It wasn't there. And I mean, at the end of the day, hate to say it, moving pieces, yes, but you are the one throwing the ball. So those 3-13 records, 4-12, whatever the records were, those didn't all come down to coaching. That had a lot to do with not some great plays sometimes.
Yeah,
That's
he
just
also
me.
did have Darren Waller too, when Darren Waller was actually good. So that was another
Yeah.
weapon. But no, yeah, I agree. But I just think looking through the second round lens, if every quarterback that a team selected in the second round turned out to be Derek Carr, like that's decent value. I think you look at Carr's career completely differently if he was a top 5 pick. If he was a top 5 pick and this is what he provided, that's very disappointing. But considering second round pick, he put together a nice career. No, he's not a Hall of Famer. He shouldn't sniff anybody's Hall of Fame. Maybe Fresno State if he's
Hot
not there
take
already.
here for you. Very hot take. You talk about top 5 picks, and if this was the same career path, this looks like Trevor Lawrence's career path at this current
Yeah,
moment. I'm not going
it
to say
does.
much about Trevor
No,
Lawrence,
you make a good
but this
point.
is
You
what
make
it's
a good
looking
point.
like.
You make a
This
very
is
good
what it's
point
looking
about
like.
Trevor Lawrence's career path. He looks very much like Derek Carr. And that's what Carr was. That's what he was. He was a solid quarterback. He was never elite. He didn't have any elite traits. He could never get a team over the top. This is just not the type of player he was, which is expected for a second round pick. Now, Trevor Lawrence, on the other hand, generational talent. That's not a good thing. We are heading into Trevor Lawrence, Derek Carr trajectory. We are.
Oh, we're getting close. The waters are
And
getting very muddy when it comes to those two.
he's got elite quarterback money, but average quarterback skill set right now. That's where we are
Honestly,
heading.
saying my friend who works with me, like Jack here, I think I might tell him that when I see him tomorrow. That Trevor Lawrence is just Derek Carr with more money and longer hair, and
And
it's
longer hair.
just it's just the truth.
Yes. Yeah. You're right. You're probably right. That's a good point. And I will just say this for the fellow Jet fans out there. Okay. No matter what the New York Jets did in 2023, we would be sitting here right now with a new quarterback. Whether they went after Derek Carr or did make the trade. Of course, they did make the trade for Aaron Rodgers. And I'll be honest, this Derek Carr news today just made me think back to the hours and hours and hours I spent just debating the Rodgers, Derek Carr debate. Rodgers, Carr, Rodgers, Carr. And it's all, in the end, it was just so many hours wasted because Derek Carr would have failed here. Aaron Rodgers did fail here. And any of the other options were going to fail here. Jacoby Brissett, Jimmy Garoppolo, Gardner Minshew, we'd be right here where we are. So looking back on it, no matter what the Jets did in 2023, they were going to be here now. So that 2023 quarterback free agent trade class, I guess, was very disappointing. Very disappointing. So for different reasons, both injuries, honestly. I mean, if we think about it, injuries derailed both of them. Not that Carr was very good last year or 2023 rather when he was healthy, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, both guys have been like a 2-year rental with such high expectations, and it would have probably would put the Jets in cap hell to go after Carr instead of Rodgers.
Yeah.
Either way, I mean, you're in fandom hell regardless.
And that was the whole thing too with Carr is like the whole thought process was that you could get him for long term. It'd probably be a 4-year contract. Rodgers was only a 2-year thing. In the end of it, they both would have been 2 years. And both of them, their cap sucks. So it was a lose-lose looking back on it. I wish we could have known in the moment, but I mean, really, there's nothing the Jets could have done that offseason that would have went right. There's nothing that could have went right because those are the top two options. They both failed. I mean, they couldn't roll Zach back out there. So they kind of did, -4 snaps. But anyway, I guess before we close things out, just from the Saints perspective now, interesting spot. I mean, this is going to be a quarterback battle that everybody should have their eyes on. We'll be following it during camp. Tyler Shook, Spencer Rattler. Feels like those are the top two. I don't see them going after Rodgers. I know I've already seen that. Oh, quarterback position available. Here comes Aaron Rodgers. I feel like anymore for the rest of time, Aaron Rodgers could retire. And for the rest of the time, if there's a quarterback position that's open, everybody's gonna be like, oh, Rodgers. So I don't see them going after Rodgers. There's no way. There's no way. I think they really believe in Shook. And they knew this. Again, like I said, the Saints knew that Carr at least wouldn't play this year. And they drafted Shook probably knowing or believing that he can start right away. I mean, do I think that's the right decision? No, but it's the decision they made. And Kellen Moore, man, you go from Super Bowl champion, everything going right in Philly, to your quarterback retires, and now you're stuck with arguably one of the worst looking quarterback rooms in the NFL in the snap of a finger. So you go from winning the Super Bowl inside that stadium to, I mean, are they going to be? There's a good chance. I'm going to make a prediction. Saints will have a top 3 pick. They will be taking a Manning, a Klubnik. They will be right up there next year. That's what this feels like.
This is what I was just about to say. The only thing is, I feel like the Saints are cooked because that means you would have taken a quarterback, I believe, in 3 consecutive drafts. So for them to go after a quarterback this year absolutely made zero sense, knowing if you knew Carr was not going to play this year, at least this year, why not instead go out and get something that can help your roster from a different position, stink it up this year, tank, and then knowing that you would potentially have a top 5, at least a top 5. I agree with top 3. You would have had between a top 5 and top 3. You trade up and you go get Arch if you know, or if Arch falls to you, he falls to you. But depending on where you land, you trade up. But now instead, you've spent a year out. You went and got Rattler for a year, which he wasn't brought in to kind of be the guy. He was just there for some insurance purposes. You used your second round pick on a quarterback this year. Absolutely made no sense. If you go draft Arch next year, you have 3 quarterbacks and none of them has been in the league for more than 4 years. Like all your quarterbacks are under the age of 25, I believe.
Head coach.
Exactly. It's just stupidity. And then you have an Alvin Kamara that's already put his house on sale in New Orleans. That's going to be ready to get out of there. They are in such a bad situation.
Yeah, and Chris Olave probably too. I mean, there's no guarantee Olave. I mean, heck, we've heard rumors this year, but even after this season, you can make the case he's going to be out. So even when you bring in that rookie, let's say they do that next year, who's he going to throw the ball to? I mean, maybe you and I taking our towns to New Orleans. The decision right here on the podcast.
That's fine. I've heard beignets are pretty good, and LSU football is not too far around the way. So, hey, why not?
No, yeah. LSU football, little 25-30 win New Orleans Pelicans action on the off days. Yep. Just fantastic.
Love it. What can possibly go wrong? Being in a city that constantly probably smells like alcohol and puke, and down wherever, I forgot the name of it off the top of my head. But hey, they got Mardi Gras though, right?
Yeah. And Kellen Moore leading it all, leading the charge. Yeah, they're in a really weird spot. Yeah. Really, really weird. And I don't know, man. I just think there was other quarterbacks better available than Shook, but prove me wrong. Go out there and Spencer Rattler, same thing. Prove me wrong. Go out there and be great. But I mean, this team is relying on a 26-year-old out of college, I believe, right? Shook is 25. So he'll be 26 in September. So essentially 26 for the majority next season. Who played, it feels like a decade in college football and was still a second-round pick, even after all those years. And a fifth-round pick in Spencer Rattler, who at one point was supposed to win the Heisman and was a fifth-round pick who transferred. So we really have no clue. And a first-time head coach, right? That's another thing, too. You know, if Sean Payton was still there, different story. I also think they would have handled this differently, but we'll see, man. This is just and there's no talent. There's no talent. Nobody. I mean, there's nobody even like. You don't even have faith in your quarterback. You don't have faith in your wide receiver core. You know, we crushed the Panthers last year. I think this year is the year of just crushing the Saints. Unfortunately for the Saints fans.
As you were about to get into any closing thoughts, that was going to be my closing thought. Like, hey, we're just going to stay in the division this year. We've crushed Carolina all year. New Orleans, it's your turn this year.
And there's a good chance the Falcons are next year. There's a good chance.
Oh, absolutely.
Because, like, there is a very good chance that they are not very good this year if Penix isn't good. And if they're not good, they're probably going to be put in a position to draft a quarterback next year, I believe, right? Or did they give up that first-round pick to move up? They might have given up their first. I think they did.
I think so. Yes, I think they did. I
To
do think
get
they did.
James Pierce, right?
I
Yeah,
think they did.
the 2026 first round pick. So they gave up their first round pick. I will put I'd put money on it that next year we're crushing the Falcons because they're going to be really bad. They're not going to have a first round pick. Let's say they are really bad. Like, let's say Penix, because there's a chance Penix didn't do much last year. We have no clue what he's going to be. He's an unknown. There's a world where Penix isn't good. There's a good chance if they fire Raheem Morris and have to restart, and they don't have a first round pick in a loaded quarterback class. So that, and they have Jeff Ulbrich prank calling people or his son. So we might be just in the NFC South here for a while. And who
We're
knows what? I
basically
mean,
just.
Tampa
We're
Bay's
basically
next
just
up.
hard knocks.
We're like the that meme of the guy or that the ghost or whatever with the sword knocking on the door.
The Grim Reaper knocking on the door.
Yeah, the Grim
Yeah,
Reaper, not the ghost. What am I talking about?
and again, we're basically just hard knocks,
Knocking
just
on.
staying in the division this year. That's all.
Yeah, pretty much. I feel like we're already bashing the Saints, and now we're knocking on the Falcons' door.
Get ready to learn ACL because they're going to be terrible. I think they're going to be pretty bad, which is so unfortunate considering that division is pretty bad.
Yeah.
So that's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun season for Atlanta.
They'll be horrible, but we'll be sitting here in week 9, and they'll still mathematically have a shot to win the division because, it'll be like the 5-5 Bucks, the 5-5 Panthers, the 4-6 the Falcons, and you'll have like the 2-8 Saints, and they'll be 3 games back, and it'll be like, oh, all it takes is a win streak. That's where we'll be at. So, anyway, that'll do it. Another episode down. Schedule release on Wednesday, so looking forward to that. Tomorrow, I just actually checked. Fox, Amazon Prime, and I believe CBS are revealing like one big game on each of their networks. So, we'll see what those are. And then, of course, as always, there's always leaks. I feel like the day of, the morning, usually you get the team's full schedule anyway. So looking forward to that. We'll certainly cover it. Of course, a lot happens between now and the season. All right, we could sit here and it's tough to really predict what could happen in a week 11 matchup. You never know. There's always surprise teams. There's a team that you can look at the schedule right now and say that's an easy win. They have a surprise season, right? Everybody last year was talking up the Broncos as wins, the Vikings as wins, and of course those teams. Who else? There's a lot of teams. The Commanders, people were chalking up as wins. There's every year there's those surprises. So we'll see who that is, and we'll of course break down the schedule, take a look at some of the biggest games. And yeah, any closing thoughts?
Kind of getting off the schedule. Last thing I'll say quickly, I believe the NFL is scripted. I don't know if you've seen the beef with the Bears and the Cowboys kind of this year, and CeeDee Lamb and I believe might have been Eddie Jackson. I don't remember who it was. And now they probably potentially play Sunday night, week 1 on Fox. So there you have it.
George Pickens Cowboys debut. I thought for a while that the Jets will play the Steelers on Monday Night Football because I thought by now Aaron Rodgers would have signed with the Steelers. And it'll be the good old Fields, Rodgers, MetLife, 2 quarterbacks against their former teams, Monday Night Football. And hopefully that's the only Jets primetime game because I hate primetime games. I prefer 1 o'clock. Just watch it. That's what I like. And I think the Jets won't have many primetime games. I think they'll have 1 or 2. They'll probably have a Thursday night game because you don't got to be a very high-profile team to be on a Thursday night game.
Yeah.
Believe me. We'll see Tyler Shook putting up 6 points in a Thursday night game this year against, I don't know, what's a really bad team. Daniel Jones and Tyler Shook. If they even play each other, that might be a Thursday night matchup where nobody in America should watch. So I don't even know if they play each other, but in a world where they do, nobody watched that game. And then Riley Leonard comes in for the second half and leads the team to kick a field goal, and that's the only 3 points we see all night. But I thought that was going to be the matchup for a while, but Rodgers still isn't signed. So in the event he does sign or the NFL expects him to sign, I could see that, but we'll talk about it. So don't want to go on and continue to crush the Saints because we could continue to do that. So we got to give Saints fans a break. And next
Sunday. Next Sunday. We got all off season. So
yeah. So anyway, thank you all for watching, and we'll talk to you guys soon.